Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Facade Focus podcast, where I aim to connect the global facade industry by sharing knowledge and experience for others to learn from. Over the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing leaders and industry experts across the globe to discuss common problems people are facing and explore the innovative solutions that will help you in your learning journey. This week, I'm joined by Todd Kimmel, Chairman of the Rainscreens Association in North America and Senior Manager of Sustainable Solutions at Rockwool. Now, Todd has spent over 20 years at the forefront of the facade industry with a strong focus on sustainability and industry education. Todd has worked in both technical and business development leadership positions for multiple leading product manufacturers. He's a certified passive house designer and sits on the board of New York Passive House. In this episode, we dive into how Rainer is setting industry standards for better rain screen design, the growing need for collaboration across the industry, and how changing codes such as New York's Local Law 97 are driving a new wave of retrofit opportunities. If you're working in facades and want to understand where the industry is headed, this one's packed with insights. Now, quick shout out to our sponsor of the podcast, which is Architectural Glass and Aluminum, otherwise known as AGA. They're a leader in custom curtain wall systems and have been providing tailored glazing solutions for over 55 years. More impressively, they're one of the largest employee-owned businesses in the glazing industry across the US. They have a phenomenal team that buys into their ethos of collaboration and craftsmanship. I'm delighted to have them as a partner of the pod, so a big shout out to the team over there. In the meantime, let's get into this week's episode of the Facade Focus podcast with Mr. Todd Kimmel. Todd Kimmel, welcome to the Facade Focus podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So I've given you a bit of an introduction already, but I just want to open the floor up to you to give us a bit of a flavor on where you've come from and what's brought you to the present day.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate, again, being here. I've been in the facades industry in North America for, going on 27 years, maybe. Starting as an engineer by education. I'm a civil engineer through Northeastern University and dove right into project management of facade systems for a company in San Francisco and the Bay Area called BT Mancini. So they were kind of at the forefront of doing high-end commercial facade work. They were an early adopter of Rainscreen technology, which is kind of where, that's where I cut my teeth, I would say, with them. But I've been in the Rainscreen industry for quite some time. I joined a company, Tradespeople North America. They a facade manufacturer of high-pressure laminate panels, and I worked on their technical team for a number of years. And then, my story is they brought me to New York to open up a design center to really promote the product to the design industry. And even then, Rainscreen was still kind of in its early phase of adoption. So I got to be at the forefront not only of the technical support, but also the business development aspect of it. From there, I moved on and worked in the membrane space with a company called Durkin. I've now been with Rockwool for about 8 years. And Rockwool is a manufacturer of stone wool insulation with, dedicated products for this kind of facade market. So that's kind of the short story of where I'm at. I'm very focused on sustainability. I have a master's in urban planning from New York University with a focus on sustainability in the built environment. And so my role today with Rockwool is fairly broad. I'm the U.S. Senior Manager of Sustainable Solutions. Obviously that intersects with facade systems in terms of applications of our products and the intersection with different systems. But I do a lot of broad industry work. So I've also co-founded and now chair the Rainscreens Association in North America, which is, in its 5th year of operation and growing quite well and really changing the industry around better built facade systems with Rainscreen technology. So, that's my quick trajectory, I would guess.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think the Rainer stuff is probably something that we're going to dig into today. And in typical facade focused fashion, we're going to look at problem, solution, outcome. Outcome obviously being what impact that has on the industry. And we've talked off camera a little bit about the problem that you see and how you're going about solving it, certainly over the last 5 years, growing the association. So let's start off with, tell us about the problem that you see in the industry, and let's discuss a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, I would say, the benefit is that Rainscreen grew fairly quickly in North America, starting in the early noughts. And there was never any sort of standardized process or even definition around the terminology. The term Rainscreen, is it one word? Is it two words? Things on a very basic level. But you had a whole, industry of manufacturers and professionals that were driving this business. And I think from my personal perspective, I can't speak for everybody. I mean, I think everyone wants kind of standardized processes and making sure that what they're building and constructing is going to meet the code requirements and and that people aren't trying to cut corners. But my view is more on the sustainability lens and recognizing that we have a lot of changing energy codes and performance requirements. Not to mention changing climate and the impact of weather events on a lot of our cities, and a good part of the United States was going through tremendous storms, superstorms, etc. And so it really put a demand on our buildings, and in particular our enclosures, to kind of ensure that we're keeping the occupants of our buildings safe, that we're making sure that our buildings are maintaining their performance needs. And Rainscreen is a great way to address that. But if it's done incorrectly, then it does a disservice to all the people involved. And so, we were really at a point where we needed to come together as an industry to standardize, expectations, to standardize terminology, to standardize testing, and just general expectations of performance. And I just was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, and had kind of again cut my teeth early on Rainscreen, that I got to know a lot of great people that had kind of expanded throughout the industry. And so, while certainly I'm not alone responsible for Raina's growth, it was neat to be at the nexus of it and help to kind of get it to where it is today.
Perfect. So for those who don't know, just tell us what RAINA is.
Yeah, so RAINA, again, it stands for the Rainscreen Association in North America. It is a trade association that, again, focuses on the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And it's really meant to, it's an active association. So there's 7 active standing committees to kind of help push forward education, training, setting performance requirements, setting terminology. We have committees that are focused on the residential applications of Rainscreen. We have a new committee that's focused on retrofit and the importance of how our buildings need to adapt for the future, and maybe even look to decarbonize or reduce energy use. And Rainscreen is a great way to overclad or reclad buildings.
Yeah.
But again, how do we do that? And how every building's different. So how do we adapt that? So having, a committee and having membership that crosses not only manufacturing fronts, but also design teams, engineering teams, fabrication, distributors, testing, code body representation. It's a really diverse group of people, and you kind of need that level of diversity to ensure that things are being done for the collective whole and the collective good.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will probably come up in towards the end of the conversation as an outcome. But what would you say is the number one, just trying to keep it super short, the number one benefit for someone becoming a member of RAINA if they're not a member already?
I think the number one benefit is helping to shape the industry and helping to kind of carve out space to ensure that that things are being done right. It's a great way to come together, and work with your friends and sometimes your enemies to kind of put the best foot forward. There's a lot of diplomacy that needs to occur, but it's not a consensus-based organization. It's a majority vote, and it's important to have involvement, whether or not we're trying to define terms. So it's taking individuals and professionals that have tremendous amount of expertise and put that to good use in terms of driving the industry for the good, moving forward.
Yeah, I think as well. Take say the membership bit aside, but even just the fact that, going on this journey as a business on your own sometimes can be a bit of a lonely place. And just being involved in some of these associations or membership programs where you've got other people that, just by being there, you're going to have ideas, you're going to come together and sort of spark and provoke conversation and new ideas for everyone involved. So I think,
Yeah, no, and that's an excellent point, Tom. I mean, I think, a lot of these companies, including the companies that I've worked for in the past, you're in your silos trying to change things and trying to encourage and do things right. And it's a lot of work. It takes away from, the day-to-day growth of the business. There's an investment of obviously money in terms of what you're doing individually and how does that get accepted by the industry. So, the Rainscreen Association provides a place for, all these companies to come together, work collectively, and to have strength and credibility in terms of what they're driving as far as change is concerned. And again, the credibility comes from an industry pushing these standards and these definitions forward. And again, the industry is inclusive of from soup to nuts, from the design phase to the install phase. It's not, a specific group of a handful of manufacturers dictating something that may or may not be the truth. And I'm all for, having worked for some great manufacturers that always kind of put their best foot forward. But, it is good to have the checks and balances. And that's what Raina brings to really drive that shift.
Yeah, and I think as well there'll be a part of it. I'm part of some certain groups myself, and you have ideas on the roadmap that you've set out for your particular business, and sometimes just being in and around even your competitors, it's idea validation, or even just validating the roadmap that you're on. That we're on track, or we're ahead of schedule, or sometimes it can just put things into perspective that you're doing the right things. A bit of a confidence boost, and look, keep going. Even aside from all the other benefits that it may bring. So, no, it's great. I think you've done a good job there of really highlighting what it is, what the purpose is, primary goal, and clearly the benefits for current and future members.
And I think and to kind of build on that as well is I think. Most manufacturers are not afraid of competition, right? I mean, I think we all need competition to grow the industry. But the key thing is having, stand-up competition, right? You want everyone doing things the right way. And I think most of us feel that there are. And you kind of want to wean out the players that, are trying to cut the corners. And so, that's another element of this. We do see, like, historically, there's been challenges in other industry segments. And, like, for instance, the EIFS industry, which has now tremendous performance criteria that's set up for modern day EIFS, but they went through some challenges. And I don't know if you're familiar with EIFS, but like the exterior insulation finish systems, I think they're known as ETEX in Europe. But another form of cladding your buildings. But there was a lot of moisture related issues because standards weren't met and set back in the 80s. And so, Raina wanted to avoid, those types of challenges and negative perceptions if things were not done correctly.
Yeah, it was learning from the past in its simplest form, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me about the problem then. What are we talking about here today?
I think, part of it was the problem was prepping for the future and having this kind of consistency within the industry. So, and maybe what I just said right there is the fact that if things are done wrong on facade systems, the number one thing that can break down a building is water, right? Moisture is the issue in any facade system or any building system. And so effectively trying to manage moisture is really critical. I would say that, as our codes are becoming more demanding and, in North America, we see a lot of these, regional codes and even the national codes emphasizing more airtightness, more continuous insulation. These building science requirements are great. Historically, our buildings are not very airtight in the U.S. and there's not much insulation. The one benefit to that is that if the buildings get wet and cold, we put our heat on, right? And that heat runs across our facades and runs across our walls and dries the walls out.
Yeah.
But with these codes shifting and having more airtight and thermally efficient designs, that heat flow moves a lot slower. And so if our buildings are going to continue to get wet, how are we managing that moisture? And so Rainscreens really do help address that through, drainage, drying, actively using ventilation within the wall cavity to evacuate that moisture, whether or not it's liquid water from the outside or moisture that may have condensed within the wall assembly. But again, the details matter, the materials matter, the sequencing matters, the climate with which these assemblies are being placed can dictate how we're going to design these buildings. So, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but these are all things that are really critical for us to understand as design professionals, as building professionals. And so again, as we're ramping up these stricter requirements, we as an industry have to be more knowledgeable about how we're detailing, designing, and constructing the buildings. And so that's the problem, right? And and so the answer is, again, trying to make sure there's transparency on that and getting the industry to respond and react and dictate how things need to be done correctly.
So on the back of that, where do you see the biggest shortfall in its current state for businesses that maybe aren't educated to where they need to be? And off the back of that, where's the low-hanging fruit where they can implement something? Where should they start? So, take a business that, really is, I suppose, doing what Rainer is trying to fix, is they are cutting corners, and maybe they're cutting corners because they've chosen to. Maybe they're not educated enough that they know how to implement everything in the correct fashion. Where's the shortfall, and what can they do to implement something that would solve the issues?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, I think the challenge is it depends on like what company we're talking about, right? So, you could have a cladding manufacturer that manufactures something like fiber cement or terracotta or high pressure laminate or aluminum composite metal, and they're interested in getting in the Rainscreen game, right? I mean, they might be using their products for other, other types of wall assemblies.
Yeah.
But the challenge is if you're just providing a cladding, I think it's important to note that a cladding itself is not a Rainscreen. A cladding is a cladding. It can be used in Rainscreens, but in and of itself is not specifically the Rainscreen. So just, again, that's kind of where an issue starts to begin with, is just like, misidentification of what we're achieving and what we're trying to, definitions, right? That was the first thing. For the Rainscreen Association, the definitions committee was set up right away, and our biggest achievement was, again, making Rainscreen a one word, not two words, then setting the definition.
We're from opposite sides of the pond, so we've got some dubious words that I'm an aluminum guy now. All of a sudden, you work long enough in the US. I ditched aluminium a while ago. Now we're looking at
there you go.
One word Rainscreen. Interesting. I mean, what I'd like to do, just to jump in there, take an ACM contractor for an example. Let's start with that as the base business, and considering the shortfalls or where you think the blind spots are for them. Not necessarily how they, I don't want to make it just about, the benefits from Rainer, but it's kind of the primary goal is to educate and bring these companies into a space where they can meet code. And, it's kind of a moving target, like we said before, trying to keep up with all this stuff. But if you were to take ACM contractor, what's the low-hanging fruit for someone that is maybe not at the level they should be?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. I think this is something that the RENA is trying to define and kind of identify, because we want to bring value to all stakeholders. And I think when it comes to an ACM contractor, where we're really going to be able to help move the needle is on training and education, and support and driving specifications around trained and or certified contractors. And so that is part of our agenda. It was not first we had to get the details and the technical aspects down right. We've got some great education for design professionals. But I mean, I think at this stage of the game, an ACM, let's say either fabricator and or installer, could kind of come in and really kind of help drive some of the requirements and really provide value to the organization on, what is actually, um, um, you know, suitable or capable to do in the field, as we're setting these standards. But I think as far as driving their business, outside of alignment with a very credible organization that's driving the industry, we're at the early stages right now of developing more robust training and education that we can offer to, let's say, their superintendents, or
Yeah,
trickle down to their key foremen. And again, not to say that these companies, don't have the adequacy or the ability to do Rainscreens effectively, but maybe there's certain things that they could be doing better, or maybe there's certain things that they're not recognizing in terms of the importance of ensuring drainage and ventilation, or thermal bridging, for instance, is understanding the impact that conductive materials across your facade assemblies, particularly going through insulation, can impact on overall performance of the wall, and the kind of the end result for the owner or the occupier of the building. And so, just kind of the key things that can help them do things better to provide a better, more robust system that's not going to fail in the future is really
yeah,
important in terms of, their business models.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
looking at I mentioned the moving target a moment ago. We're talking code, we're talking, things at a local, regional, national state. Um, where do you see the industry changing the most? So, we're talking about moving targets and people trying to keep up, and, Rainer providing um, education and ongoing support so that people can meet all these changing requirements. Future looking, outward looking, where do you see the biggest changes that are potentially coming down the road?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in our current environment, that could be changing every day.
Mm.
So, it's, we'll wait and see. And, I do live in my New York City bubble when it comes to codes or policies, they tend to be out in front of the game. And so I have a lens of potentially what's to come. I mean, cities like New York, cities like Boston, cities like DC are all starting to implement these more strict energy codes, that could influence, again, how we have to stay focused on the details on building better buildings. But here in New York, we have what's called Local Law 97, which essentially is setting carbon taxes on buildings that are the worst carbon emitters, and it's going to progressively get more aggressive, over the next 15, 20 years, such that probably 80% of our large buildings over 25,000 square feet are going to be at risk of getting heavy fines. And
Wow.
so they are looking at strategies to decarbonize, and that's a broad picture of beneficial electrification, looking at improving systems, looking at improving glazing and windows, obviously looking at mechanical systems, all of these things play a role in it. But the envelope, the building's walls and roofs, play a huge role in reducing energy demand right from the get-go. And so it helps us to not have to rely on an electric grid as heavily as we did, because capacity might not be there.
Yeah.
And so, again, we're looking at retrofit, right? And I have the benefit of working for a company like Rockwool here in New York City that is very a heavily used product,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
for insulation, and heavily used within Rainscreen assemblies, which is great, as well as other assemblies.
Yeah.
So not a week goes by, Tom, where I get 2 to 3 calls from architects looking to figure out, hey, I've got this old brick building, how, and the client needs to decarbonize. We want to put a Rainscreen on. How do we do it? Can we attach to the existing brick? Do we have to go slab to slab? How do we manage the moisture, behind it? Do we have to put a membrane up? All these kind of, important critical questions,
Yeah.
um, that we have to address, not only for New York, but again, we're seeing these codes develop in Boston, and I think the trend is going to continue, across the United States and hopefully across the world, in terms of
Yeah.
retrofitting our buildings to meet a climate challenge, and to help, not only reduce energy use. But I mean, I think a big part of this, Tom, is, if we are getting power outages due to major storms, is the safety of occupying buildings that are in the middle of winter without power, or in the middle of the summer without power. And so if we're effectively adding insulation and airtightness, the ability to shelter in place is also a big part of it. So I'm getting broad here, but this is a challenge. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of with the Rainscreen Association is the development of our retrofit committee to kind of help create the tools necessary to address the varying building typologies. In New York City, we're fortunate to be in a city with so much architectural history, but we have 30,000 different types of buildings that we have to address. So a playbook to address them and to kind of highlight case studies, because these things are happening, is really great. And I'm hopeful that that's really going to pave the way for the future for implementing Rainscreen effectively in our existing buildings. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Setting up a playbook and documenting as you go, so that other people can learn from that when the same issue or project scope or whatever it is comes up in the future as well. I think it's an intelligent way to spread knowledge and help others, upskill not only themselves but their staff, and then their business capabilities as well, what they can deliver.
Yeah, and it's a huge opportunity for all the players involved from a business sense. I mean, we talk about the green economy per se, but I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about in terms of developing the right trades or the tradespeople to address this challenge, to help not just decarbonize, but to make our buildings better and more robust, and to not to keep them off the grid to a certain degree, which I think a lot of people could appreciate. 80% of our carbon emissions in cities are coming from our buildings. So like any of these pledges that we're making to decarbonize as communities, as states, as regional areas, or as a country, we have to look at our buildings, and most of the buildings are already built. So that's a big part of the focus here.
And the local law 97, that is encouraging people, essentially, if they're striking people with fines, encourage is probably not the right
it's encouraging. Yeah, encouraging might be a loose word. I mean, I think that it is encouraging people. I mean, that it is true to form. I think at the end of the day, and I'm not part of the policy teams in the city of New York, but I can appreciate what they're trying to do, and I am concerned for my kids' future, for sure. And so, this is an important part of it. But I mean, you need a stick as well as a carrot, right? And I think this, local law 97 is essentially that stick. I personally, have now a new view because I just moved into a new apartment in New York City. I'm now a shareholder in a large old co-op building that is probably behind the game with energy performance, and so
you're living it real life.
I'm living it, and
you've got the experience,
right? Well, and it's also like you're in New York City, it's a very diverse socioeconomic grouping, particularly where I'm at, and some people have money, some people don't have money, and I think the weight of having to do a major retrofit on this is a 120 unit building that was built in 1929. Like any aging building, it's got some challenges and issues, and in our economic climate, all these shifts and changes and modifications are expensive, so it'll the next couple of years will be interesting for me as I'm trying to navigate a lot of this with my neighbors.
I was going to say, where does the fines that would be in place, I imagine they must be severe enough that it hurts enough to offset, or not offset, but the cost of a full retrofit can't be, not that it's not too dissimilar, but I imagine the fines are severe enough to say, hey, look, we need to do this retrofit and figure out a way to fund it. This episode is brought to you by Architectural Glass and Aluminum, otherwise known as AGA. Looking for a trusted glazing partner? AGA has been working alongside industry leaders for over 55 years, providing reliable and high-quality glazing solutions. Specializing in Class A office buildings, hospitals, airports, and higher education, AGA creates custom curtain wall systems tailored to your project needs. With a focus on collaboration and craftsmanship, AGA is here to support your next project. So visit aga-ca.com to learn more about their services and capabilities. That's aga-ca.com. Now back to this week's episode.
Environment around how to address that and how to sequence the work, how to access funding, how to access monies to support it, depending on kind of the types of buildings that you're working on, and how to plan for it. So there's a great organization called the Building Energy Exchange in New York City that's kind of a resource, a neutral resource to help any stakeholders, guiding them through this process and to access this information. So, I mean, there are resources out there. It's just people have to go out there and access them.
Find it and look for it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This may be a bit of an off-topic question, but something that just came to mind. I'm thinking of, your specialism is New York, and as you said, you're in that bubble. You understand Boston and maybe some closer locations. The dog wants to have his say as well.
He doesn't like carbon either, so he's
apparently not. No, I'm glad he's got involved in the conversation as well. So looking at the learnings from this, so what you know of New York City and the codes and how they're changing, let's use a similar example like I mentioned with the ACM Contractors. So maybe there's other cities that are behind. Maybe they're not even based in the US. Maybe they're, international. Maybe they're in different continents altogether. What do you think is the biggest learning that another city that has this problem but hasn't implemented something like Local Law 97 could take from the way that New York is approaching this problem?
Sorry, what is the biggest problem or the challenge with adopting that? Is that the question? I'm sorry.
No, biggest learning. What could another city look at New York and the way that they've handled this and implemented these local laws, the fines, the codes, the requirements? What do you think is the number one learning that another city could look at and just take that away?
I mean, I think, providing education and communication around it effectively is really important. And, I do think New York did a good job of it wasn't a policy. Once it was developed, it wasn't like, this is starting tomorrow. There was a nice, 4 or 5 year window to help prepare and get the industry, prepped for it, to understand where the financing takes place. And it's hard, I would say, as boots on the ground as a manufacturer and contractor. I think there's still a lot of players here in New York City that do a substantial amount of enclosure work that are not fully equipped to understanding the laws or the requirements. So I guess, getting out there and proactively understanding how it can influence the business, the industry, and the market is important. I think there's a lot of people that are out there that maybe even still don't believe that this is really that this is going to hold, and that it's going to come crumbling down at some point or another. I don't see that as being the case, and I think that there's a lot of people that are not going to permit that to happen. But I think that there's going to need to be ways to understand the financing of it, and really accessing that, because I think that's going to be, as I live and breathe it, is going to be a challenge. But there's opportunities there, right? I mean, the moment that Local Law 97 passed, a number of consulting firms popped up to help guide developers, owners, any of the stakeholders through the process of decarbonization and kind of setting up a playbook for how to address it. And I think even for contractors to understand and ensure that they can address retrofits. I know that there's a couple of companies, Tyndall Lawrence, for instance, here in New York City is a contractor that I was involved with on a nice retrofit. It's a project at 201 East 79th Street, which was a 25-story old brick building that was going with a Rainscreen overclad and adding 4 inches of Rockwool insulation, which was great.
Yeah.
And they're very dedicated to doing it. And I know that they're already working on 3 or 4 other projects, with similar type clients trying to do the same thing. So there's opportunities there for contractors to get out there and to gain the experience on how to do these things and put themselves in a position to really promote that moving forward, because there's a huge market for it. They're not, it's untapped, and it's hard to forecast what's coming down the pipeline because it's not like a standard developer that's, purchased a property and is planning to develop it. And there's, a lot of exposure and visibility through, your CRMs and, your CMD initiatives, but it's there, it's coming.
Yeah. So the biggest, again, just sort of following on from my last question before we move on onto the next part, looking at the education piece, obviously we've got RAINA, which is, an association, it's education, it's pushing the industry forward, it's, equipping businesses to be able to continue to meet and also shape the industry. Is the education piece important? I'm thinking again about different cities, people that are in different parts of the world, they're going to listen to this. Is the education piece more important for the owners of these buildings, the architects, manufacturers, contractors? But where do you think that critical information education piece needs to start with?
I mean, I think when it comes to Rainscreen, I think it needs to start with, the primary players, from the manufacturers to the design professionals from the design professionals, the manufacturers, to the contractors, right? I mean, I think that's really critical in just getting the details done right. And as we talk about a global scale, Tom, I had the benefit of being invited by the IFD, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but I think it's like the International Federation of Roofers. It's a European-based organization, and they have a facade arm to that organization. And I was invited as the chairperson of the Rainscreen Association to join their World Congress and their World Championship in Innsbruck, Austria last November, which was pretty cool to go to.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of countries, including Germany and other countries in Northern Europe, that have similar associations to the Rainscreen Association that are dedicated, to their local markets. And the IFD brings a lot of those organizations together. And so, it was neat that RAINA had the opportunity to go across the pond and to kind of witness what they're doing there. It was almost like the UN of Rainscreen assemblies.
That's what I had in my head when you were describing it. Yeah.
But what was really neat, and is something that I'm excited, and hopefully RAINA can kind of tap into, is they have this. It's called the World Championship, and they have predominantly a lot of roofing groups, but they also had a Rainscreen group where they invite countries to have 2 individuals, candidates that are 25 years or younger, to compete within that specific segment. So it's almost like the Olympics. They do it every 2 years. And these 2 25-year-olds can have a coach, but the coach can't touch the wall, right? So they have a single coach that's able to kind of help guide them, and they have to build a wall. And then there's judges from the IFD, and there's a huge gala in the evening that the award ceremony is given, right? People in tuxes. And you get these young tradespeople that are just super thrilled, motivated. They're artists in their craft, which was really amazing to see. And it's a real tribute to the IFD because it also really helps to grow the trade, right? I mean, I think a lot of people, particularly this day and age, would rather be sitting behind a desk like me right now rather than being out there rolling up their sleeves. But it really provided an energy in the room and an understanding of how to do things right. I was really taken aback by it, and would love to try to implement a similar type of competition in North America, and hopefully have a team that the US or Canada can send to Budapest in 2026 for the next World Championship to
Wow.
compete on the global stage for Rainscreens. So, I think as your listeners from across the world are kind of tuning in, just understanding that these types of things do exist, it can give visibility and can help promote companies to push forward on training and education to do things the right way, and to also encourage our young professionals from like diving into these types of trade work that are so critical to address the demands that our buildings are taking on, so that we get the details right. So the details need to be right on the paper, but it also needs to be done right on the building, and that's going to be a really big challenge for us moving forward. With the way technology is working and the way that we're so stuck on being on devices, and we're just not getting out there and doing enough. So that's a big challenge to overcome.
I love the fact that that's involving young people, 25 and under, to get them thinking about, the industry and involved and hands-on. And I imagine that must be posted online somewhere, YouTube or something, that you can watch it.
You could probably, I live in the world of LinkedIn, that kind of guy. But I know that there was a lot of videos. I think I even posted a couple of things. But you must be able to find stuff. They have video cameras going around, so the footage exists somewhere.
I'll see if I can dig out a link from somewhere. I'll go on a bit of a hunt and see if I can find out.
I personally was just amazed by like the pitched roof folks, like the Austrians and the Swiss and the Germans, like just the beautiful designs that they do, which not to take away from the U.S., but we just don't do our roofs that way, so it was really interesting.
What did you take away from it from a learning perspective? I'm talking selfishly for you, not wider for the industry, but you talk about the beauty aspect of the pitch roofs and how architecturally they're aesthetically pleasing. What did you take away as a learning for you personally from the visit?
I think as you mentioned, the young people getting involved in the trade, I just it's something that I don't even think about, or I didn't really think about until I was there, and the focus that they had on the tradespeople and not just your standard, we need to get them educated, but just really kind of showcasing the importance and the value and the beauty of the work that they're doing. I think that is sometimes overlooked. That none of these buildings that our star architects are designing and developing are just going to build themselves, right? I mean, there's craftspeople that need to make this work, and whether or not it's Rainscreen or curtain wall or eaves or what have you, like the function of that beauty, and when I say beauty, I also mean the proper performance, not just the aesthetic, but the actual execution of what's meant from a thermal and moisture management perspective is a function of what these people are doing. The sweat work on these buildings, and really highlighting the value and the importance of that was just really special for me. That it's something that I really want to kind of ensure that we can do through RAINA and hopefully through other avenues that I'm involved with in the industry to kind of push that forward.
Brilliant. So all of those young, aspiring, under 25-year-olds sat in the US and Canada that they need to be gearing up for, did you say Budapest 26?
Budapest 26, yes. Probably in November of 26. So get ready.
So we got 18 months to prepare for that then, to get the best two candidates out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. Cool. Look, we're going to go into some quick-fire questions. I've loved the conversation. I think from a problem, a solution, RAINA is obviously critical to the industry, certainly from an educational perspective, and helping shape the industry and getting businesses involved in the conversation, helping improve, standardizing everything. So I think what you've done and where it's come so far is incredible. And I implore people to, if you haven't heard of RAINA, if you've not got involved, just go and look it up. And I'm sure not that I want to flood your LinkedIn with 1,000 messages, but I'm sure your inbox will be open for people to pick your brain on it as well.
Yeah, no, I welcome people to reach out. So I'm happy to connect dots or provide guidance as needed. Yeah.
Brilliant. Cool. So let's get into some quickfire questions. I'll first thing that comes to mind. So don't think about it too hard. We will hold you to your answers, but don't think about it too hard. Right. Let's start off with favorite food.
Mexican food. Yeah, for sure.
If you had to be more specific, Mexican, what would be the dish?
Probably a nice California style burrito. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You're talking my language now.
Mission.
Yeah, like that. Sports team?
Probably the New York Mets. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Baseball.
Yeah. Very good. Do you follow any of the other New York teams, or is it just baseball that you're into?
So I am baseball is my primary. I started following American football, later in my life when I was I was living in Southern California at the time. So I was a San Diego Chargers fan. Who are now the Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm sure it's the Los Angeles Chargers, isn't it?
Yeah. So we were season ticket holders back in San Diego in the 90s when they last went to the Super Bowl, my dad and I. And so I'm one of the few, because a lot of the San Diegans gave up on them when they moved to LA, but I had already moved to New York. So I was already just rooting for laundry really at the time. And so my mom and my sister's family are in LA. So it's just, I'm one of those few long time Charger fans.
Yeah. I love that. Cool. So what's your favorite city and why?
Oh boy. I mean, New York City, I guess I have to say, it's a dynamic city. Public transportation is easy. You really get to intersect with all sorts of people, that, could be, movie stars, just walking down the street, the general people you do and work day to day with. It's been a really special place for me and my wife and my kids who have grown up here. My daughter is now kind of a latchkey kid. She's 13 and taking the subway to and from middle school. So she's going to grow up pretty strong, I would say.
Sure, that's.
But New York, the culture in New York and all that stuff too. It's all great.
Yeah, imagine that. Was that a big shock to the system from coming from San Diego, or was it just an easy transition? You kind of just
I guess I didn't give my full life story of but I'm from outside of New York originally. I moved to San Diego when I was 10. So coming back, and I went to Northeastern in Boston for my education. So, from the time I was, let's say 17 years old, I was living in cities, whether or not that was Boston. And then I moved to San Francisco, and then I actually lived in San Diego proper. So city living was something that I was used to. But I think New York City has been the most dynamic and, the largest city, obviously, and the easiest to get around and interface with. That was not a difficult transition. My wife, too, she's been living in cities since she was a child. So that's kind of where we are.
What would your favorite bit be about San Diego? If you were to go back, what would be the biggest pull for you down there?
The weather and the beach. Like we go, in fact, I was just there 2 weeks ago for the kids' break. And now we're talking about going back. For the one thing I regret in San Diego is, like, when I lived there, I lived near Balboa Park, which was beautiful, but I had 2 years there as a working professional. I should have been at Mission Beach or Pacific Beach. And, if I could go back and do it again, I would have lived by the beach. But who knows what the future holds?
Exactly. Yeah. Things change. Absolutely. So tell us about your favorite. You can choose one. Favorite book or movie.
Oh boy. Let's see. I like reading biographies. I'm reading the David Grohl, the Storyteller biography. I like learning about people. I just recently read, and I don't remember the name of it, the Jeff Tweedy. Obviously, I like music biographies and just kind of learning about the stories of, everyone, putting on their pants on one leg at a time, and everyone starts from the same level.
Life stories, where they come from. Yeah, so I think I'm the same. I don't get too much into the fiction stories. I do struggle with them, but I can kind of relate those, like, real life stories of where people have come from, the journey they've gone on. I think is, I can
inspiring.
Yeah, I can dive deep into them.
And
Cool.
relatable, and then it allows you to feel like you could do stuff too. Like it's, that's
Exactly. They you
for me,
sometimes
it's,
forget that they're just people.
yeah,
They're these big stars or these big successful entrepreneurs, business people, artists, whatever it is. But they've all come from similar backgrounds, and they've carved out their niche and really understood who they are and what they're good at. And I think that's a pretty cool trait to have. Cool. So tell us about this. This is a tricky question, and I don't even think I've been able to answer this yet, but I am asking everyone. What's the best bit of advice that you've ever received, personal or professional?
Best bit of advice that I've ever received. Probably don't sweat the small stuff, right? And I think I still need to live by that a lot, and understanding what's small and what's not small, particularly, dealing with kids and being a parent. But
Yeah.
I really try to apply that when I get a little overwhelmed with something.
Yeah.
And I actually try to make things smaller than they might really be, to be able to kind of navigate through it. You kind of have to compartmentalize and push things through. But I think
Yeah.
that's really been helpful, is that, in this day and age where we're all so busy and trying to navigate things, the challenge of prioritization is always going to be there, and trying to, just minimize the stresses. That,
Yeah.
you don't need to
There's
kind of
enough of
create a
there's
heavy
enough.
weight for.
Yeah, there's enough of them, isn't there? Especially
Yeah,
when you've got notifications on your phone as well, and then you've got
yeah,
the kids, and then you've got your personal life, and not sweating the small stuff is great to live by, and probably harder to do in reality than
yeah. It's a work in process. I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it, but I
yeah.
try.
Yeah. I think it's a great thing to aspire to, isn't it? I think that's probably
Uh,
something that you'll always be working towards.
I'm sweating now, by the way, Tom. So
There you go. All the small stuff in there. Cool. So tell me about, if you could have a dinner with anyone, any historical figure, who would it be, and then why?
oh boy, probably one of our founding fathers. Just
Yeah.
to kind of, yeah, just to kind of check in with them and see,
See what's
kind of
up.
see what's up. Maybe get some keywords of advice for kind of the world we live in right now. But yeah, that would be probably something I'd be interested in doing for sure.
Excellent. And what would be the number one thing on your bucket list?
So in 2004, I attempted a through hike of the Pacific Crest Trail, which runs from Mexico to Canada through California, Oregon, and Washington. And I got basically to the Washington border. So I did about 2,000 miles, 2,100 miles of hiking over 3.5 months. And so I still want to go back and, I would say, finish that hike, but probably, start from scratch and do the full thing as a through hike. So that's something that I want to revisit. And it was interesting when I did it. I was in my mid 20s, and it was either it was a pocket of people in your mid 20s, and it was a pocket of people in your mid 60s. So it was like right before your professional career took off and right after retirement. So I try to keep fit. I'm not going to say I'm perfect at that, but I want to make sure my body's ready for that when I hit my mid 60s. So
how long did that take?
A through hike is it depends on how quick you go, Tom. Some people can do it in a month, but those are the speed hikers.
Sure.
On average, I would say most people take between 3 and 4 months to do it. Maybe even longer, maybe 4 and 5 months. I started the end of April and I finished around the end of August, and I had about 600 miles left. So it would have taken me about 5 months to complete. Yeah.
Wow. To go back and actually start it all again and just go A to Z.
Yeah, that would be my hope. Some might say, why don't you finish what you didn't complete first? And then, I could start from the north and go south. So that way I'll hit Washington State first.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, 2 birds, 1 stone. I like it. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Um, it's like, I'm a creature of habit. The last 2 years we went to Cozumel with the family, and it was amazing, and both
Yeah.
times were great. So it's someplace that I have in my heart to kind of go back to on a regular basis. But it's a beautiful spot. So that would probably be where I'd want to be right now if I had
Yeah.
any choice.
Yeah. Mexico, East Coast.
Yeah, Mexico. Yeah. It's on the East Coast. It's
Yeah.
it's not far from Tulum and
Yeah.
Cancun. It's a little island off in the Caribbean. Yeah.
This is awful, but I think I've been there before. But I think it was Cozumel.
You can fly right into Cozumel, or you could take a ferry from.
I think we went on a ferry. Well, we were south of Cancun, is where we were.
Right. So it's exactly. So it's halfway between the ferry terminal is about halfway between Cancun and Tulum. Where all the pyramids are. And so you can get on a people ferry, and the name of the town where the ferry is escaping me, but it's a well-known town.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but I definitely feel like I've been there. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, that sounds nice right about now. So we'll finish it off with a mulligan. So mulligan, obviously a golf term, a redo essentially. So if I could give you a mulligan, a redo on any decision you've ever made, what would you choose?
Oh boy, I don't know. That's a tough one. I would say with the stress of being a property owner in New York City, maybe I would have chosen to keep renting our under market value apartment, 2 years ago. And maybe that would allow me to not sweat the big stuff. I'm sweating today. So maybe that's the right answer in the moment, but I'm sure there's other stuff.
Yeah, let's go with that. I like that. Well, no, look, I really appreciate you giving me close to an hour of your time. Interesting conversation. I think there's some stuff that people will take from that to learn from. I think it will open some eyes as well with Rainer and what you guys are doing and how much you've grown and where the industry is going and how people can actually get involved and be a part of shaping that with Rainer. So I appreciate your time. I've loved the conversation. It's been great talking to you, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for reaching out and thanks for making this happen. It's great.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Todd.
All right. Take care.
Guys, that's it for this week's episode of the Facade Focus podcast, presented by me, Tom Caldicott, founder and CEO of Unity Search, where I help glass and metal businesses hire the best talent and build their brand on LinkedIn. Now, I've worked across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and North America, and I'm on a mission to help connect each facade community to give you the tools to learn and grow. Now, I'm a big believer in sharing knowledge and provoking conversation, so I hope you take something valuable from each episode that gets you thinking about how you can be better tomorrow. Remember to like and subscribe the video on YouTube and give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It really helps us reach more people to achieve our goal of connecting the global facade industry. Tune in again for next week's episode, and I'll see you all there.